Hail and well met, Slayers of Giants. Welcome to Chapter 12 of my serial novel, Tilting at Windmills. Remember, this is a draft, one example of which will become apparent today. In the first chapters, I went out of my way not to name my wife, Chris, because at the time of writing, it seemed like it might be kinder to have her go unnamed. Now that decision is creating this awkward repetition in the book, where the narrative voice keeps having to refer to her as Benjamin's wife. I've always been uncomfortable with terms like wife, husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, etc. because though we often need to identify characters and real people's relationships to one another, the terms can subsume a person's entire identity into their relationship to another person. And now, in an effort to protect Chris's privacy, I made that even worse by constantly referring to her fictionalized character in reference to her marital status. No one has complained about that yet, including Chris, who's been reading these chapters as avidly as anyone, but I've been increasingly uncomfortable with the Borat-style "my wife" references. When the entire novel is compiled, I'll go back and identify Chris by name from the beginning. There are lots of changes I'll be making that are like that, and some have come about because of feedback from readers who have posted it in the comments on Substack and Patreon. If you notice anything like that, from the smallest typo to the largest structural change, I'll be very grateful for your feedback. So please comment away on whatever platform you're finding this, and become a patron of my Patreon or subscribe to my Substack so you'll get a little reminder each week when a new chapter comes out. And if you want to do me a particular favor this week, if you've been enjoying and following along, recommend this to a friend. You know, those person-to-person contacts mean more than any advertisement or post on social media. So tell a friend, hey, check out the show. I've been enjoying it. That'll really be huge. Okay, here we are. Tilting at Windmills, Chapter 12. Lady Cali of Omaha. My name isn't really Cali, and I'm not from Omaha, Cali said. She sat behind Serge and spoke to the rearview mirror. Rolando, who rode shotgun, turned back to give her his full attention. My story is the story of two runaways. The first was my mom. Cali's story would change Serge and Rolando's lives forever. In a way, the conversation Benjamin and Chris engaged in was equally momentous for them, though it didn't feel all that exceptional. Before their reconciliation, Benjamin and Chris had already done so much analysis of the problems in their marriage, and though they'd reached the breakthroughs which allowed each of them to return to one another with hope for their shared future, they still felt trepidation their interactions might revert to an unhealthy new status quo if they weren't careful. By the third day of their drive, Benjamin and Chris had passed through the euphoric relief of the near miss of the end of their marriage, and now they could have more challenging discussions about the ways they would have to change, individually and collectively, to avoid those bad habits. One might expect this would have made for an unpleasant drive, but Benjamin really enjoyed discussions which verged on the uncomfortable, because they felt high stakes and immediate and even precarious. A wordsmith in all his professional capacities, he fixated on discovering the correct word to describe what he was feeling, why he'd reacted in specific ways in the past, and how he expected to interpret his reality in the future. Chris, in addition to similarly preferring meaningful conversations to safe ones, enjoyed analyzing the ways relationship patterns played out in human behavior, like plumbing the depth of coastal waters with a weighted line to find the ways rocky structures far below were changing currents on the surface. Was this childhood trauma causing this behavior of hers? Was that reaction running up against an incompatible behavior of his caused by that childhood trauma? By the third day of their journey, they were ready to be systematic about the patterns they'd need to change, the triggers they'd need to spot, the grace they'd need to give, and, more than anything, the conversations they'd need to have in order to build a better life together. And both of them enjoyed the discussion immensely. Meanwhile, in the SUV Rolando had rented in Cleveland, the conversation was more one-sided and far less hopeful, at least at first. Mom was born and raised in the thriving metropolis of St. Leon, Indiana, Cali said. Rolando frowned. I have not heard of this city. I'm kidding. It has a population of 650. Was even smaller when she was young. She escaped by getting good grades and going off to college in the real big city, Indianapolis. She busted her ass in school and got a full ride to Butler University. Papa and Meemaw did not approve of her going off to the big city, but they were somewhat mollified by the size of the school, I think. Butler's a small Christian school. Still, they forbade her to go, and she left without their permission. She was a runaway, too. Her freshman year went fine, and she didn't come home for vacations or summer break because her parents had made it clear she was no longer welcome. Then, during her sophomore year, she got pregnant. I've never been clear on how much she knew my dad. It was either a pretty short-lived relationship or a one-night stand. Either way, he has no idea I exist, and my mom won't tell me much of anything about him. I knew he was tall. I knew he was dark-skinned and had an accent, though she could never tell me what kind of accent. My guess is that he was an international student from somewhere in Africa, but I have no real idea. I know he didn't wear glasses because my mom wears glasses and I don't, and she says I must get my vision from him. Oh, and he had long, thin fingers. That was something specific she remembered. One thing I know for sure I got from my mom, her dreams of the ocean. Most little girls in St. Leon are into horses, but not my mom. She had posters of beaches and dolphins and mermaids in a landlocked state a million miles from the ocean. Mima and Papa indulged her love of the ocean because both of them had had some kind of connection in their childhoods. Papa's dad had been stationed in the Pacific Northwest during World War II. Mima's family came to Indiana from the Gulf Coast. Mom had never seen the ocean, but she told me she dreamed of it, and I started having those dreams too, probably because of her stories and the posters, and the constant sense I didn't belong in St. Leon. That's why I chose the name Cali, California. That's where I'm headed. In a way, that's where I've always been headed, the Pacific Ocean, far away from St. Leon. Pregnant and panicked and all alone, Mom dropped out of college and went back to St. Leon without ever seeing the ocean. Her parents took her in, but they treated her as damaged goods, and they basically made sure everyone else in town did too. And then, when she had a mixed baby, she became a walking cautionary tale. Don't leave St. Leon and be a slut in the big city, or you'll come home with a black baby. It's weird to say she should have gotten an abortion, because then I wouldn't exist. And I'm not saying I don't want to exist, but I can rationally accept that it would have been the better option for her. But she was from that deeply religious background, so she wouldn't. She dropped out of school, moved back in with Mima and Papa, and was basically treated like a source of communal shame for the rest of her life. I served a different role in town. I was a badge people wore to prove they weren't racist. I was this weird little mixture of pride and shame for my mom, for my grandparents, and for the people in our church. On the one hand, I was an object lesson for the girls. On the other hand, I was this badge of honor. See, I have a black daughter, so I can't be racist. See, we have a black granddaughter, so we're not racist. See, we let this child into our Sunday school class. We go out of our way to make sure we greet her during coffee hour to show everyone we know her name. I'll touch her hair because it's strange, but also shows I'm willing to make physical contact with her. She's our point of pride because she shows the world we will accept someone so completely unacceptable into our community. They were Jesus, and I was the leper, the tax collector, and the whore all in one. My mom would tell people she wasn't ashamed to have a mixed baby, and that I should be proud of who I am. And then, out of my sight but not out of earshot, she'd use the N-word with a hard R to tell her friends about the man who had ruined her life. When people were talking about how much they hated liberals, they looked at me out of the corners of their eyes to make sure they'd hidden what they really wanted to say behind their new slur of choice. They also looked at me when they said illegals, which tells you something. Serge examined Callie's face through the rearview mirror. Her voice was matter-of-fact, a journalist recounting a stranger's story, but her eyes widened at the end, and he could see the sadness there. He tried to think of an appropriate, comforting thing to say, but all of his replies sounded insufficient and awkward in his own head. "This is terrible," Rolando intoned softly. It wasn't the worst childhood, and that says something, right? I had a roof over my head, 3 squares a day, a mom and 2 grandparents who loved me as best they could. I had friends in that town. I wasn't a total pariah. And I had enough access to the world beyond St. Leon to know that my life didn't have to be that way. And that's really important. Between the library and the internet, I learned my life could be different from my mom's. I didn't have the patience to wait until college, though. When I was 15, I ran away for the first time. I did some panhandling for bus fare and made it as far as Denver before realizing I wouldn't be able to get a job or an apartment. I wasn't ready to do what I would have needed to do to survive. So I got myself home. And they were so pissed, they put me on a kind of lockdown that was downright medieval. Every second I wasn't in school, I was watched and guarded, kept inside the house, no access to the internet or friends or anything. Even in church, I sat between my grandparents and couldn't say more than hello to my friends. And then it was summer, and that was even worse. Inside the house, all day and all night, basically in jail. And it gave me the motivation to do what I needed to do. So when school started the next year, I was in full planning mode. By the time I ran away the second time, I had a ride lined up, people to stay with, everything. All through contacts I'd made on my friends' phones in moments when no one was looking during the school day. After my jailbreak, I went to Indianapolis. Yes, the same city where my mom had gone off to college. Only I was 17 and didn't have a full ride to a university. And you can't get a credit card or rent an apartment or buy a car if you don't have money, especially when you're a minor. You can work fast food or house cleaning at a hotel or something, but options are limited. But if you're willing, if you've steeled yourself, if you've got a very clear idea of the alternative, and the alternative is house arrest in St. Leon, you can do what you need to do." She paused, waiting to see if they would say something judgmental or curious. Both men remained silent, waiting. So I turned tricks for a while. First on the street, which is dangerous, but pretty soon I was able to make enough money to stay in cheap hotels regularly. Then when I was 18, I could get a job stripping, and that gave me enough of a credit history to get an apartment. I'm not going to make excuses for the Johns. I was a minor, and they were criminals. Every one of them, no exceptions. No nice guy who had a heart of gold and wanted what was best for me. But I was lucky. None of them beat the shit out of me. None of them robbed me. Well, a few didn't pay, but that was rare. It was not a happy time, but not a terrible time. It was a job, and it paid the bills. Until I got the attention of a certain police officer. Not only did he not pay, but he made it clear I was at his beck and call or he would arrest me. And not just for prostitution. He'd plant drugs, weapons, accuse me of assaulting him, felonies that carry years, decades. And I might have been able to fight it, but it was easier to just think of it as cost of doing business. It was my payroll taxes. Only he got rougher, and I knew I had to leave, and the only way was to get out of the state. So I got as much saved up as I could, and I moved to Milwaukee. By then I'd learned to do all my connecting online with sugar daddies. No more turning tricks on the street. Payments in advance if possible, nice dinners first, and only going to hotel rooms if I felt like it. Basically a promotion from an entry-level job to a manager of my own small business. And I started going to college. I'd been telling my customers I was a college student for years. Felt like I could pretty easily make that lie into the truth. It took me longer than 4 years to finish my bachelor's, but that's because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I like telling stories, obviously, so I thought maybe journalism. You know, the true stories of sex workers, a memoir of a girl who got out of a small town, that kind of thing. But I also wanted to do something involving the ocean, marine biology. Also, I had all this experience listening to men, reading them, helping them deal with their problems. And I would hang out with other women who were in my line of work, and I felt like I was a good listener. I thought maybe I could be a mental health counselor, but online and naked. I know it's totally unethical, all kinds of boundary issues. But I could build a whole business as a non-licensed therapist on OnlyFans. A lot of guys really just want to be heard, you know? I mean, they want to whack off, but they have all this pent-up rage and shame and no real friends. There's a business opportunity there, and I would feel like I was helping them. After I graduated, I was kind of tired of Milwaukee and ready to see the ocean. And I know it's weird that I hadn't gone earlier. I could have. Taken a spring break trip to Cabo, had one of the Johns take me on a cruise or something. But I felt this hesitation. Like I had to wait until the right time because once I made it, I wouldn't want to come back. So I got my degree, paid it off so I have no student loan debt, and ran away again. There was something nostalgic about hitching my way out of Milwaukee. And I had connections now. You might not know this, but us OnlyFans girlies support one another. We do videos together, sometimes virtual and sometimes in person. I'd made real friends in other cities, and some had come to visit me, and I'd gone to work with some of them. So I didn't make a straight shot toward California. I kept working, making my videos with friends in Nashville and Lexington and Cincinnati. Where else did I go? Oh, I stayed for a few nights in St. Louis. Fun city. And then I came to Omaha. And when I got there, I was talking with a friend I was staying with, and she told me about a bunch of cops, not in Omaha itself, but in one of the burbs, who were pulling that same con the guy in Indianapolis had been pulling on me, but at volume. My friend was like, "Get out of Omaha. If they find you, you work for them. They take a cut and pass you around, and if you try to leave, they will kill you. Girls try to disappear, and they disappear, know what I'm saying? And not just in Omaha. You make it out and try to work in another city, and they find you." And stupid me, I thought, this is my big story, my break into journalism, chapter 10 of my memoir. I'm going to put together the stories of the girls stuck in this ring, and I'm going to take these guys down. And you know what I learned? This happens all over. And it's not reported because the people who decide what stories get told are in on it in some way, shape, or form. And how high does it go? To the top. Way beyond the top, actually. The people we think of as the top, they're just pawns of the people we can't see. International intelligence agencies and billionaires, and they blackmail people with their greatest shames. Think they want some story coming out about a low-level prostitution scandal in Omaha when they're protecting giant ones around the world? The more girls I interviewed, the more I learned that this situation here is just a local franchise of a global conglomerate. And the people at the top will absolutely kill the girls. But they will also kill the cops, too. Hell, they'll kill people way up in the food chain to keep this all a secret. And I started to think I was getting noticed. All it would take was a girl, scared and poor and desperate, to tell someone about the woman with the big frizzy red hair, and they would come and find me and kill me. And they will kill you both, too. Sorry I got you roped into this, but you're on the list also. Serge turned to Rolando. They have the license plate number. They'll be able to track it back to you, to the card you used to rent the car.
Perhaps. I think they may have some challenges discovering my true identity. When a business establishment requires a credit card instead of cash, it makes me suspicious. I used a card for the car which will be very difficult for them to follow back to me, even with all the powers of law enforcement. I am far more worried about Garibald of Gaul and his contacts with various countries' intelligence agencies.
He turned back to Cali.
We have some dangerous people hunting us as well, but we will keep you safe.
Because you're knights, she said, her incredulity flattening the question into a statement.
Precisely. And also, I am a lord. And though the title does not give me any particular legal privileges, the multi-generational wealth affords us some protection. Rich people rarely go after rich people. They target people they don't see as equals, if they can help it. We worry we may have attended the same parties, and may have been photographed on the same carpets. We have been searching for some missing women as well. My contacts in Chicago were not able to tell me the whereabouts of someone who went missing there. Considering your troubles and our quest, I think it best we leave the state. We will head north to Sioux Falls and see if we can learn anything about another missing person there, then continue on to Ontario, Oregon, after a brief stop in Utah, then get you to the Pacific Ocean. The route may not be the most direct, but we will keep you out of Nebraska and get you to the ocean, where you belong.
Serge kept his eyes on the road, looking for the exit that would change their route to the new northbound direction. Do you think the conspiracy Cali discovered is related to the curse?
It is certainly related, but I do not think it is the cause. Bajes are not intelligent creatures. They seek out a need for authority and feed on it, just parasites motivating parasites. If these corrupt public officials and billionaires are organizing a global blackmail and sexual exploitation operation,
he turned to Cali,
which I do not doubt.
Then back to Serge.
That may not involve the curse at all, but it may be a manifestation of the curse. The way Americans tolerate it with very little curiosity or outrage may be a product of the curse. Perhaps if we can find the source of the curse and defeat it, people would hear Cali's story and want justice, instead of wanting her silenced so they can go about their lives. I do not know. Perhaps finding the missing antanas would help us, or...
He looked back at Cali again.
Lady Cali, what do you know about St. Leon?
Like I said, spent most of my life there. 650 people, tucked between the high school on the other side of the freeway and the North Dearborn Community Park, where you can take a peaceful hike to the sound of people shooting traps. Home of Wiffle-Rama, the most important annual wiffle ball tournament you've ever heard of.
Yes, no, I mean the person, St. Leon.
Cali shook her head. Nothing really.
There have been a few saints by this name, but the town is probably named after St. Leo the Great, Pope Leo I, the man who met with Attila the Hun in his tent. Do you know this story?
Attila the Hun? The one with the elephants?
No, that was Hannibal, 600 years earlier. By the time of Attila, the Roman Empire was divided into East and West, and the Western Roman Empire had recently been ravaged by a great plague. Attila was an emperor of a bunch of other groups, Huns, of course, and Gepids, Ostrogoths, and Alans. He spent most of his energy conquering and fighting with the Eastern Roman Empire, but he made a famous foray into Italy, and made it almost to Rome. The Roman Emperor sent Pope Leo, and they spoke in Attila's tent. No one knows what was said there, but Attila turned around and left. Some historians think Attila was ready to turn back anyway, but some see Pope Leo as a great hero who saved Rome with nothing more than courage and rhetoric.
So he might have been a hero?
Well, Pope Leo is also credited with eradicating Manichaeanism from Rome, another religion, followers of a person named Mani. It was a large and lasting religious group, but it was pushed out of Europe by Christianity, then finished off by Islam, though many of its ideas were subsumed into both religions, so in a way it lives on today. But the followers of the religion in Rome do not persist, because Leo had them rounded up, tortured until they confessed to various crimes, and executed.
Cali nodded slowly. So, not exactly the paragon of peaceful conflict resolution.
Well, that's my point, Lady Cali. People are, as you Americans say, mixed up bags.
Mixed bags, Serge corrected.
Yes, bags of mixed items. I believe there is far more to you than people would expect. In fact, I think there is far more in your bag than even you yet realize. Well, I hope we discover some answers to the case of the lost Anhanas as we cross the country, and while we cannot forget to make our little stop in Utah on behalf of a friend who wants a message sent to his cousin, I believe it is of vital importance that we get you safely to the Pacific Ocean, for there you may discover more than you expect.
Cali blinked a few times. I don't understand half of what you're talking about, and you're kind of creeping me out. But I'll accept the ride and the protection, I guess.
Excellent. And Serge, in your nightly recordings of our adventures for posterity, I think we should dub our guest the Lady Cali the Lion-Hearted of Santa Leon.
Serge nodded along as though he would add this to the detailed notes he had not been keeping. Rolando scrutinized Cali in a way which made her uncomfortable precisely because it was not the kind of leering she was accustomed to, as though he could see some aura she couldn't.
Though I think your title will change significantly as you discover who and what you truly are.
If you're excited about this project, please subscribe on YouTube or like and share on TikTok or Reels or whatever app you're on now. And if you're willing to support me as I craft this novel in serial form, please consider supporting my Substack or Patreon. Each week I'll give a shout out to some of those patrons. This week I'm thanking Patreon patrons Scott Ulrich, a friend of mine since high school, also former student and current friend Alex Walker, and Jason Fields, author of Death in Twilight. Thank you all for your support. If any of you listeners are creators and have something to plug, please email NotAPipePublishing at NotAPipePublishing@gmail.com. See you back here next week for Chapter 13 of Tilting at Windmills. Teaser. Rolando and Serge make a huge discovery in Sioux Falls. What is it? I don't know yet, but it will be significant. So come back next week and we'll find out together.